You doing the thing? Intro video? Here we are. So, hey, we're live Friday again. And in fact, for those of you out there listening, this will be the last for the moment of these bi-weekly Friday tastings and discussions that I have this evening. And we're going to move, same thing, same place, same time, but due to harvest, we're going to move this to the cellar, and we will be doing something new with discussions in the cellar with the cellar team and with myself, kind of giving you guys a show of what's going on every couple of weeks, and maybe if it proves worthy, we'll do it every week. But that'll be a couple of Fridays away, so look for that. It should be fun and entertaining and interesting, and delve into some of the cellar practices a little bit and meet the crew, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll be frazzled and dirty and wet and having a good time doing a show with you guys. So tonight's guest is a friend of mine. Met him, gosh, I don't know how long ago, and we'll get into that. I vaguely remember him right back in the early days of a winery called Domaine Alfred. We used to hang out and talk about organics, etc. And then he has his own label, Sinor-LaVallee, which I'm sure I pronounced wrong. Great wines, his own vineyard, and he's the winemaker for Ancient Peaks. His name is Mike Sinor. A great guy, very active in the business, great history, great track record. Should be an interesting conversation. I haven't had a good chat with Mike for a number of years, so it'll be good for us to catch up too, I suppose. So let's bring Mike in, if we can, Ian. Hey, Mike.
Neil, how you doing, my friend?
Good. How are you?
Doing well. Thank you. Doing well.
Thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. It's an honor to come hang with you and the Tablas crew.
Yeah, it's kind of last Friday night that you and I will be hanging around doing nothing at 5 o'clock on a Friday night, I think.
I hear you, man. It's about squeezing for squeezings right now.
The grapes, they are coming. So I was trying to think about this today, and when I first met you, you were Domaine Alfred, right? I think. I mean, where were you before then?
Yeah, I think that's when we really hooked up. I got there in November of '99. Prior to that, I was 94 through 99. I was with Robert Mondavi at Byron Winery in Santa Maria.
Oh, no, I did. I met you back then because either I came down there or you came up. I did meet you when you were still at Byron. I'd forgotten that.
Yeah.
But really, when we came down, visited you and Terry Spicer at Domaine Alfred.
Yes.
Right? And as we came down, and we talked about organics and sunflowers and Grenache and all that stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I remember. Yeah, because you had 80 acres. I had 80 acres. We were kind of BD. You guys were organic, and there was a great conversations. And then I remember thoroughly enjoying Bob Constantino on your ranch for that weekend. Was just amazing. That was one of my favorite. That was amazing.
You know, amigo Bob passed away this year. Did you see that?
I did, man. My heart. I saw it happen. It was a heartfelt for sure.
Super sad. But what an inspiring human being. I mean, I've mentioned this on this talk many times. I mean, he's the guy when I first got Tablas and farming that vineyard organically for someone who'd never done any farming before, like myself, seemed completely out of my reach. And just one day hanging out in that vineyard with him, it just seemed like it was all totally doable.
He had that way about him, you bet, man. He had a special sense of him and how to do the work we do. And yeah, what a great inspiring guy.
And so for those of you that don't know, I mean, Domaine Alfred, I remember it probably in the 80s, it was Chamazal, right? And then it became Domaine Alfred. Yep. And then it went back to being Chamazal now.
Exactly. In fact, we were talking about my history. So 94, I started at Byron, but before that, I was at Cal Poly, and I worked for 6 wineries in the Edna Valley, and working for most
of the was only 6 wineries in the Edna Valley when you were there.
I think 8 or 9. I still have I've kept all my old vineyard maps, like the little tasting maps. And I worked for Chamazal It was the Goss. Norman Goss started that in 1972, and Clay Thompson, Claiborne and Churchill Winery. He was the winemaker there, and I worked for him. I was his guy, so whenever he needed something done, he'd call me, and I'd rack barrels, clean barrels, bottle wine, whatever he needed. So I actually worked at Chamazal Original.
So Clay was the original winemaker at Chamazal. That's right?
Yeah, towards the end, it was actually, Norman Goss was from I never met Norman Goss, but he was pretty instrumental in it. And then his son-in-law, Scott Boyd, was actually there. But towards the end, I think Norman had passed, and there wasn't enthusiasm for the family to carry it on, and they were trying to figure out what to happen, how to do it. I had to transition it, and that was when Clay Thompson was the winemaker towards the end.
Yeah, I mean, Claiborne Churchill still benchmark for me for their Gewürztraminers and those wines. I mean, they've been doing that a long time, and they've always been great wines and at an incredibly reasonable price.
Yeah, those guys, again, that's why I do what I do was being a 21-year-old around Clay Thompson, Clay and Frederica, Bill Greeno at Sausalito Canyon. Those guys, I just thought, man, I got to do this. This is awesome. Those people were just wonderful. And, they took me in, literally I babysit their kids. I house sat for them. Man, I just loved being around them and being around the business.
So I met him. He used to buy like 4 A&K barrels every year. I was working at Adelaide Cellars, and we'd buy a lot more. Like we'd buy 20. So they would drop his 4 off at our space, and he'd come up and pick them up. Yeah, $180 a barrel. And in the end, Silver Oak ended up buying that cooperage. They own the cooperage now.
Oh my gosh, I remember that brand back in the day. That's classic.
You can still get them again. They'll sell them to you. They're a little fancier and they're a lot more expensive now, but still an interesting barrel. I made some cab in them a couple of years ago.
Oh, very cool.
Great wines. So Doman Alfred was Terry Spicer, and he came from he's a tech guy and created asteroids or something. I have my vague memories of.
Yeah, he worked for Atari. That's exactly right. My story was correct. He was the first national sales guy for Atari because Atari was actually a pinball company, and they invented an industry called video games, Pong.
Whoa.
Yeah. So, and he was there, and now he went to San Jose State on a basketball scholarship, and he was hanging out with all those guys in the tech time period, way before, home computers. It was before the small microchips and way before the internet. But yeah, he's an old school computer guy. He doesn't know how to run computers, but he's an old computer industry guy.
Yeah, he was a pretty dynamic character, as I remember. He was a lively fellow.
He still is. He still is, man. Living in Pismo Beach, and he's an entrepreneur. That's really what his passion. I mean, he loves wine, but he just liked entrepreneurism, and he's still investing in stuff, involved with young entrepreneurs around here, and still enjoy life.
You hear that? Bill Lappy was a tech geek, Atari inventor. He got into wine, got bored with that, and moved on. So you'll only be around for a while, Mr. Lapp, and you'll be moving on to bigger things. You entrepreneurs. Bill's kind of doing the same thing. He came down. He bought a vineyard. Told himself to farm the vineyard, or told himself to have managed the farming of the vineyard. Now he bought the Roto Winery, and he's learning to spend money on rebuilding a winery and making wine and creating a brand. It's cool to watch. But he likes to refer to himself as a tech geek.
Nice. Living the dream, man, aren't we all? I still love when people get in, and it's just fun to share what we do.
Well, they make a lot of money, Mike, and then they just want to be you.
Well, yeah. I was recently reminded, Chuck Carlson, actually it was a couple of years ago, and he was hearing me. We were pouring next to each other at an event pre-COVID, and I was telling a story about buying Vassy Vineyard and how poor we are. So he said, "Man, you're really living the Burgundian dream. You're dirt rich and life poor." I said, "Oh man, I got to put that on my label."
Well, let's talk about that a little bit, because that's interesting to me. So you bought the Vassy Ranch, which I hadn't been to until 2 weeks ago when I came to your barbecue down there, and right there at Avila Beach. I mean, how did that happen? Because that's a pretty cool site for you to get your hands on.
Without a doubt, I can't dream that big. I don't think that big. Only through the blessings of Ancient Peaks, really. Ancient Peaks is owned by 3 families, Rossi, Widstroms, and Filipponis. And Rob had been involved with that property before. He actually owned it at one time and leased it to a guy, and he planted the vineyard. And then it came up for sale, but it never went on the market. It was one of these, again, right place, right time. The Ancient Peaks team backed me financially, a little bit, and kind of angel invested me and helped me get in on it. I'm paying them back over time. And we're able to acquire it. Yeah, 112 acres of land, 30 acres of vineyards producing overlooking the ocean. Pretty cool little spot.
It's like 1.2 miles from the ocean.
It is, as the crow flies, using that Google Earth. It's pretty close, but yet protected, So it is. We're very happy with the site and very honored to be able to get to farm there.
And so really, really credible guys making wines out of there these days. That must be pretty good for you to see your grapes going to some of the people that I met at that thing.
Without a doubt, honestly, that's one of the newer things in my career, that when we acquired it in 2013 and I absorbed all the fruit, with my systems. But, as things change and life changes, we have to adapt. And so in 19, I started selling a little bit of fruit, and then 20, the word kind of got out with small producers. And yeah, now I've got like 16 clients out there now. And I'm only selling about, everybody's a ton to a biggest client might be getting 5 tons off from us. They're all very small producers, but we're very like-minded and passionate people. And that, I tell you what, Neil, it's a different feeling, and it is a very prideful feeling to see your vineyard name out there with other companies and seeing their interpretation of our soil through them is very exciting, very fun.
Yeah, I can only imagine that. I don't own Tablas Creek, but I get somewhat of the same feeling when I'm out there. When we're at tastings and people come up and they've planted the clones that they got through Tablas Creek's process, and they're proud of the wines that were made from those clones. It's pretty cool to see, and people are really excited about it, which I think is super cool.
Yeah, no, and I love that after all these years, we can still have new emotions, new experiences. And for me, that's probably one of the top ones is selling fruit, and my gosh, we all know the hardest part of this business is selling wine. And so, and to be able to give a good person and a wonderful human being some grapes you worked hard for, and then invoice them that day.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Yeah, exactly.
I was actually having a conversation with a gentleman up in Cienega Valley. I don't know if you know the Wurz Vineyard.
I've heard of it, certainly.
So the Wurz Vineyard is a Riesling vineyard planted in 1964. And the current owner is Pat Wurz. We're buying a couple of tons for Lomadrone from him. And I asked him, you ever think about making wine yourself? And he said that exact same thing. He's like, always thinking about it. But then I look at you guys trying to sell the bottles, and I'm glad when that truck drives out the road.
Yeah.
Wisdom of an old farmer right there. So we'll be getting a little bit of Grenache from you for Lomadrone this year, where me and the kids are super excited about that.
So am I to work with you guys, man. That's the best part, is having these relationships and helping people get through it. It's just fun.
Cool. So let's get back to where you were doing. Fred, you built that brand up from nothing to something pretty substantial, as I recall. I don't know what case production you're at, but it went from being a winery with a pretty strange name to being a really well appreciated brand locally, for sure.
It did. I was honored to my experience there. I was his first full-time employee, really, in the wine as a winemaker. My first professional, I would say, winemaking, head winemaker job. I was assistant at Byron under Ken Brown, training and then take that job. I had my own brand by then. So, but when you have your own brand, I don't consider that professional. Anybody can just grab a trash can and a bat and make some wine, And so, yeah, it was a brand new brand, and then I left in May of 2005, and he sold it by March of 2006. So, and he did extremely well with it. It was good. It was a very great sale for him and his.
Did you know he was selling when you left, or did you leave and he was heartbroken and sold?
I think his joke in the tasting was it was always for sale every day, which I never understood. I literally don't have a mind for that. The idea of building something to sell has only occurred to me in the last 2 years. I just think wine is who I am. Grapes are what I do. And so for better or for worse. And so I just couldn't think of doing that. For me, it's more of a life. And so, but he always said that, hey, everything's for sale every time. But he was serious about it, and went and found a buyer, and he sold it.
Yeah, that's cool. And it went back to Chamazal.
Yeah, well, that was an interesting one. Yeah, it was funny because this business, I mean, Patrick DeLong. Actually, I worked with Robert Mondavi, and he was at the Crimson Wine Group. He was the senior CFO, so he was the one actually negotiated with Terry for the sale, and it was interesting on the back end hearing how it all went down. And they bought it, and then with the intention of changing it back to Chamazal and going in a little bit of a different direction. They've got a great company with Archery Summit, Pine Ridge. Chamazal.
Oh, yeah. Not a bad group. And then old friend of mine, Finton, went in as winemaker, right? And still there.
Still, I saw him yesterday. I bought some used whites from him, and he's doing great work, man. In fact, I remember when I left, Terry reportedly interviewed like 60 people for the job, and I said, "Hey, I'm here for you. Whatever you need to have happen, I'll happen." We left on great terms. And he said, "You know what? I got this one guy for you to interview. Would you interview one guy for me?" I said, "Sure." So this guy from, he's a Kiwi from Adelaide. I was like, "Oh, I know exactly who it was." And so he was the guy I talked to, and he was pretty young at the time, really. And my gosh, he's done a fabulous job, and really has a great operation he runs now as general manager, winemaker.
Yeah, he's a pretty dynamic guy. Good guy. Still speak to him from time to time. Bought some bulk juice off him for a project I'm doing this year. Great. Even the bulk juice was good. So it's a good story. Yeah. So when did you start? Can I do this? Yeah, I can do this. This is your label.
Yeah. So that's the Sinor-LaVallee company, so my wife and I, like I said, we started that in 1997. We got married in Burgundy, France in 1996. I was on a Robert Mondavi trip, and we can make it so romantic today, but it was more just we want to do things our own way. We come from pretty humble means, so we thought, well, let's just get married over there. Didn't invite our family, and then came back, had 3 receptions here in California. Because again, it's more of a hustle, man. We just wanted more gifts, and so we had a reception. 3 of them. And so we actually made remember those old Libby wine glasses from the 90s? I hated those. And so but everybody had them. And we had them printed. It said, Mike and Sherry, newlyweds on tour. And it listed it was like a tour, May 1st in Beaune, France. And then Visalia, California, my hometown. So my mom could throw us a party. Sacramento, my wife's hometown, so her mom could throw us a party. And then we threw a party for our friends. At the time, we were living at Claiborne and Churchill Winery. And they hadn't even built the winery yet on property, but we had our personal reception there. So, and then the year after that, I started making Ducey Zen and McGregor Chardonnay on that label.
Really, the first wine was Ducey Zen under your label.
Yeah,
did not know that.
But you know what? Nobody really did, Neil. Again, it was a different time and place. We know this. I mean, you were there. It was just different, And I've always worked really hard to do the right thing by my employer. And so I never, ever brought it above the table. Hey, this is my side project. I just kept quiet about it. I never sent it for review ever, not until just recently, really. Everybody knew me as a Byron guy, Domaine Alfred guy, even at Ancient Peaks, people, I'm glad you started your own company, Mike. It's like, well, yeah, I just kind of go on, but I've had that company for a long time. I've kept it quiet, and it's always been a personal project, small family project.
Personal problem.
That is exactly right, dude. It was all fun and games when I was selling it kind of black market without licensing for the first couple of years. I mean, that's highly profitable. It's like that was cash flow nice.
Yeah.
But then I want to buy a vineyard, and so
there you go.
Yeah, now you're millions of dollars in debt, and things look a little different.
I've done the same thing with La Madrone and Tablas. I have never ported at a tasting that I can remember with Tablas. I mean, we've been on tables close to each other a couple of times, but I would never pull it out from underneath Tablas Creek table. That would be the end of my credibility at Tablas Creek, I think. So we'll try and keep them very separately, which makes it difficult sometimes, but life is so much easier being able to do what I do there, and I love that project too. So we keep it super clean and super separate.
And that's exactly it. I heard that from my mentors, And I've seen friends of mine do it wrong over time, and they never lasted long, you know. And
it usually does go wrong. You know, I'm super transparent with the Haas family, Bob and now Jason. If I'm doing something, I try to make sure they hear it from me first. You know, they don't hear it from someone else. And, you know, they're super generous to let me make the wines there and get them in barrel and move them out, so I don't have to go running around doing stuff. So,
yeah.
and then slowly but surely the kids are getting involved. So that's cool. And so you're still doing it though, right? But now more Pinot, but presumably everything comes from Bassi Ranch now.
It does, yeah. For the Sinor-LaVallee company, that's one of our main focus. It's an estate company now. But, you know, again, the vineyard was just an absolute wonderful location and planted well with 6 varietals, you know. So it is a kind of a perfect little estate, you know, vineyard.
Farmed organically?
You know, it was. When we took it over, the gentleman before us was definitely, you know, farming it organically. And then we jumped, you know, the biodynamics for me really started. I first got onto that first trip in 1996. One of our technical meetings was at Domaine La Fleuve, and Pierre Moret was the general manager at the time. And they were just experimenting in 96 with this thing called biodynamics. And they were pretty passionate about it. It was pretty interesting conversations, and came home and started reading about it. It was pretty fun. But yeah, we bought Bassi. That's what we started with.
Are you doing biodynamics fully at Bassi too now?
We are, you know, not as good as you guys do, Tablas. You guys are inspiring, and I think do one of the best jobs I've seen anywhere. For me, it's mostly using the preps. You know, I think it's really easy getting the preps out. I haven't done much calendar work, but as of this year, we made the dedication to get certified. So we've been putting our paperwork together, and we do look for Demeanor certification. I think my goal is right after vintage, get that paperwork submitted, and to do a better job at it. You know, I think that's, as us selling fruit has freed up some little more immediate cash flow, and I think the environment's better today in our industry than it was back in the day for certification. I think people understand it, you know. And I've kept it quiet. I mean, I've worked with it for so long. It's not something that people who work in our tasting room in Avila, we don't start with that conversation. We let the customer ask us about it. If they say, hey, they like what we're doing, and they ask us how we got there, they'll hear about it from us. Nothing we lead with going in the past. Going forward, we might lead with a little bit more as far as a marketing point.
I think that's cool though. You know, I think we had this conversation already, but you know, because something's organic or because something's biodynamic does not mean it's good. You know, it's got to be farmed well. You know, you can go through the motions of doing all this stuff and still produce a shitty box of grapes. You know, the dedication to good farming and understanding that there's a bottle of wine at the end of this that needs to be of high quality is factor number one.
Without a doubt. And I've been around it enough and knowing that there's a lot of other things that can really improve quality in bigger leaps and bounds that you have to get down first. You know, when I think about biodynamics, my opinion is it's kind of like the gravity flow wineries of, you know, it's like, yeah, it helps, but I think you're dealing with it with a top tier of moving it pretty small, incremental. If you don't have the building blocks of good viticulture, knowledgeable, good people, it's not going to save anything. You know, it's really
totally. And that's a conversation I have with my son Jordan and Austin, both of them. It's like, that's great, you know, doing these things are great, but it's got to be followed through the whole way. You know, doing everything gravity fed at harvest and it takes forever and yada yada is great, but you can't then forget about what's going on in the barrel after that. You gotta, those attention to details have to follow the entire way through everything for any of it to make a difference. You know, so when you get to farming, you know, there's a lot of, we farm organically out there, but we're not certified, or we are certified. And then you taste the fruit, or you go look at the menu, you're like, okay, I mean, this isn't for the right reasons.
I've been in those vineyards. I've traveled and tech toured places, and they're just all about the philosophy, you know. And but it's more of a laissez-faire organics, like, oh, we don't do anything, and I just don't think that's the right thing, you know. I remember having a great time with Ted Bennett up in Navarro, you know, and he spoke a lot about his early years moving out to the city. You know, he's an original hippie. You know, I forget what it was, like maybe Circuit City or some stereo thing he sold for a lot of money and moved up to Mendo. And, he said everybody's making these organic, they want to save the earth, but whatever they were making, their philosophy was more about their business model was more about the philosophy of what they're doing. And then with the core product they're making suffered. The wine wasn't good. The apples were awful. They didn't produce much, but hey, they were organic. And so it's really, you got to have the good business practices and have all the other things in place first.
Yeah. I mean, we do dealt with this a lot with our shepherd, with the sheep. It's like wanting to do all this stuff in the vineyard to enable us to do certain things with the sheep. And I'm all for it. Sheep in the vineyard is one of the greatest things we've ever done. But we have to remember, you can't make a vineyard for sheep. You're making the vineyard for a great bottle of wine, and that has to come first. And the sheep have to fit within that program. And that was kind of the balance that we've been searching for with those critters in our vineyard. We'd love to keep them in the vineyard all year round, or be able to. But, he was like 8 feet tall, so he wanted to do a 7-foot cordon. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's not going to work in many ways, But I got his point, yeah, sure, that would be great. And the sheep can be in there, but it doesn't work for what the end goal is, and you can't lose sight of that with the passion of the people you have working for you in their zone.
Exactly. We've got to be the maestros to manage the whole thing for sure.
Yeah, it's good fun. So future of your brand, you're doing Pinot, Chard,
Grenache, Gras.
Grenache. We had a bit of the Grenache. It's beautiful.
Yeah, Pinot Gris, Chardonnay. I just planted some Aligote, so very excited about that. Just a few vines. We're curating our own Massal selection, so from various vineyards around California. And so that we're going to do it head trained too. So I'm kind of excited about playing with that on this little tiny patch we're working on right now.
Are you finding your personal, if I'm reading this correctly, finding your personal passion shifting towards the vineyard side and making a little less wine and growing incredible grapes?
Without a doubt. I mean, I think that's exactly where I'm at in my career, my life. The vineyards are where I want to be, and as we were talking earlier today with regards to the kids, our son's 21 and has done a few vintages, and I'd love for him to get more involved. And once he grows up a little bit, and gets more experience. And I definitely would love to just focus on that a little bit more and have a little more help in the business itself,
He's listening to you right now thinking he's got plenty of experience.
I know. Oh, they're so smart at 21 years old.
I know. So let's taste the wine because we're getting through this. So we started with the Pickpool, Tablas Creek. Sorry, we started with 2018 Esprit Blanc. So we're looking at 66% Roussanne, 21 Grenache Blanc, 8 Pickpool Blanc, 3 Pic Ardenne, and 2% Claret Blanche. The Esprit, until this vintage, forever had been Roussanne, Grenache Blanc, and Pickpool Blanc. So it's the first time the Pic Ardenne and the Claret Blanche made the cut. And the Esprit is always native yeast, all our stuff, native mallows, very little in the way of new oak, just a sniff maybe in this one, but blend the pick of the litter when it comes to the blending session.
Beautiful wine. Congrats to the team.
Give us your sensory analysis, Mike Sinor. The nice one.
I just love the way it lifts the aromatic. I think there's a purity, there's a perfumey, just really lifted aromatic. It's beautiful.
These wines age beautifully too, with all the Roussanne in there. Roussanne's a tough cookie to deal with, but you get your money's worth when you taste these wines after 10 years or so. Yeah.
Well, the tension in the mouth. I mean, Clark Smith talks about the vibration, and minerality, that sort of thing. This is a great example of that character and flavor. I think for me, trying to explain minerality to people is sometimes hard and obviously a controversial subject, but
it is these days, right? There's a lot of controversy, and I hear people not saying it so much anymore, but I kind of feel it for sure, and I mean maybe it's not minerality, but it's certainly what the soils bring to that wine. You can feel it if you spend time in that vineyard, as I have. You can feel that vineyard in that wine. There's no question.
And that's exactly, I've always felt it was some vocabulary problems we had with that word minerality, that, oh, you're uptaking some limestone or some calcium, and it's no, again, it's a vibration, it's a tension in the wine, and this is, to me, is one of the finest examples of that character that I love, and it's hard to
I mean,
find.
I think it's a thing to me throughout wine descriptors. I mean, we use so many descriptors that does it really smell like quince? Well, no, but that's the closest I can bring you to what I'm smelling. You know, and the minerality, that term is just the best way I can describe that feel of the vineyard, I think.
Yeah.
And people are picking on that at the moment for whatever reason.
You talked about Claret Blanc being the first time it made the blend. Why did it make the blend in the past? What's changed?
Really, honestly, it was more, so we get these new clones in, or new varieties in this case, and we always make them for a couple of years until we get to understand what we think they are and what we think they bring to the table. Mm-hmm. And we bottle them varietally so we can introduce others to them. And we don't have very much of them. You know, we plant like 1,000 vines of each when we get a new thing in. And so it was more a case, we never thought that we were ready to let it try being in the Esprit. And so in 18 was the first year, you know, when we go through our blendings, we put together 3 or 4 versions of Esprit after we've tasted everything and done a bunch of other tasting and chatting. And then we'll bring those to the table blind, and we'll taste all of them. And we go to, you know, order of preference around the table, which usually about 6 or 8 of us. And unanimously, everyone picked the one with both of them in there. I mean, the last time we did that was 2004 when Viognier got pushed aside for Picpoul Blanc. Huh. And it's done blind. I mean, did I want both those things to make it into the blend? Totally. I would not tell you that I could have told you which one had them in that blind tasting, but we all liked that wine, so it made it, you know. And as of 2020, which is super exciting for me, I think it's 2020. Yeah, 2020 blend, the Esprit will have all of the whites of Chateauneuf in it. So Bord Blanc made it in too. So that's pretty cool. You know, so now our white will be all of the Chateauneuf white varieties.
Oh, well, congratulations, Neil. It's amazing how what you guys
years in the making, but
that's where I'm going, man. I mean, none of this happens overnight, and but what you guys have done for us, first in the wine business, but in Paso Robles, it's just a feather in the cap of Paso that you guys, you know, the two families chose the area, and the quality of wine you guys work. It's just amazing.
Yeah, it's a feather in the cap, and it's been pretty good for me too, Mike. I'm not gonna lie. No, cheers. I love this wine. It's always a favorite.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's move on.
I think you should keep up the winemaking, Neil. I think you should stick with it.
Well, I don't have enough money to buy a 100-acre vineyard on the beach, so I probably will, Mike. Although if you hear of something, let me know. So let's move on to taste your wine. This is the Sinor-LaVallee Pinot Noir Cabernet Carbonic from the Bassy Vineyard, 2020 vintage, so young. Explain to the people what Pinot Noir Carbonic means from the Bassy Vineyard to you. And
yeah, so, you know, for Sinor-LaVallee, it's kind of my little experimentation experience, you know. For us, when we acquired the vineyard in 2013, prior to that, we had vineyard designates were kind of our reserved wines. We had Tally Rincon, 1 acre for 9 years. We had the Aubin vineyard. I worked with Luna Mata and Paso before, so I had vineyard designates. But suddenly we own our own vineyard, and I had to figure out how to go to market with that, which is not my thing. And so what we ended up doing was kind of bringing these different wines to market, white label and black label. So, you know, our winemaking has always been kind of working with extremes. Right down the middle is what I do. When it's right, and we go. But I love pushing the edges of things, and so I love picking early. I started that really in I don't know, 2000 and 06 to 07, 08. I started really picking a lot earlier just to see what that was like, bringing some acid to the blend and then leaving some stuff hanging. I mean, that was a Domaine Alfred trait. You know, the love that Domaine Alfred received was really about the new clones we had. And we started picking riper. You know, we were that genre of, in my opinion, was pushed by Burt Williams and Adam Tolmack, and we just picked ripe. And so, anyway, for my own company, Sinor-LaVallee, I release we call white label Pinot Noir and black label Pinot Noir. Those are extremes. And so it's really about showing these different flavors of one place, and is unique. Most brands will kind of put their flag in a style and just execute it in the field. You know, I think of Tablas Creek. You guys make elegant, beautiful, food-friendly wines across the board. You know, a company is going to make it. Maomi, it makes a certain style of Pinot Noir, right? And it's very consistent. It's very ripe and big and heavy. But for Sinor-LaVallee, hey man, let's go slow and do them all. You know, and so I've got a Pinot Noir at 12% alcohol, and I have Pinot Noir at 16.7 alcohol too. So I like playing with these different things. Most of what I do is right in the middle, though. That's what people sometimes only remember the extremes from me sometimes. And so to that end, carbonic fermentation, as we know, is fermentation inside the berry itself. It's not a whole cluster. You know, I do a whole cluster Pinot Noir, and that Pinot Noir is going to get foot stomp, foot tread. And so it brings forth a whole different dynamic of flavor. This was a carbonic wine, loaded the tank, and never really did anything to it other than pulling the juice out. And we did pull the juice out and just drip it over the top like a pour over or a pump over, but we never manipulated the grapes and then pressed them. So I've done this probably 3 or 4 times with the brand, but I've never released one. It never really came out to my liking. And this year, I was pretty into it, you know. And
it smells super pretty.
Yeah,
you can smell that carbonic nose is pretty striking, right? It's very clear.
Yeah, I'm really going for that carbonic flavor and less of the herbal stem flavor, which is what the whole cluster wine is about. And it is also another impetus was our tasting room. I'm actually here in Avila Beach at our tasting room, and we just opened up a shuck shack here with oysters. So
you did?
We did, yeah. It's kind of one of those kind of COVID situation and just trying to change. You know, I'm a classic midlife time in life, and so
I didn't see that coming.
Oh man, yeah, exactly. Who wants a restaurant? But I thought, well, you know what? Let's just go. We love oysters. My wife and I, and her maiden name is LaVallee. I should have jumped in with that, but you know, so we've always loved oysters. Even before when we were flying them in, when we had to like call on the phone, you know, for New Year's Eve, we were known for bringing oysters with our group. And so I worked up with Neil up at Merrell Bay Oysters, and so every Thursday, Friday they deliver oysters here, and we sell oysters in our tasting room. We have a patio in the backyard here, about 1,100 square foot of space, but you have to shuck your own. So it's literally just get a bottle of wine, get a bag of oysters, go in the backyard, and just shuck on.
So kind of like Hog Island thing going on there.
And I just saw your post when I saw your social media post. I should have chimed in, but that was 100% the impetus for it. Is it's Avila Beach Shuck Shack. We're kind of marketing. It's honestly it's a marketing ploy to sell wine.
Yeah.
But tell you what, what I like about it is it really does self-moderate the customer, because you know I'm from Visalia, Fresno area, and anybody who has to shuck their own oyster, they like wine and they like food. And so it's been a hit. And so back to the carbonic Pinot Noir, I thought to myself, hey, what can I make in a red wine with oysters? And I thought, man, how many times have we had nice Beaujolais and oysters, you know? And to me, that was where some of the—
You can see that working.
Yeah.
I got to jump in with this because it's one of my favorite stories, but probably one of the great phone calls of my life was I was sitting at home and the phone rang. Bob Haas was on the line, and Jason Haas was in Vermont getting married, and Bob called me. He's like, you know, if you go over to the Templeton house, there should be a big box sitting at the gate, because I ordered oysters from Glidden Point, which was his favorite oyster place. And if you don't know it, go online, buy oysters from them. They're on the East Coast. And he bought all the oysters for Jason's wedding from Glidden Point, but he shipped them to the wrong address.
Oh.
So he called me. He's like, there's this big box of oysters. So you go over to get them and have an oyster party at your house. So I went over and picked them up, and my wife had a whole weekend of having people over and eating all these oysters. You know, cheers, Jason, for that one. But there was I don't know how many hundreds and hundreds of oysters there were. We ended up barbecuing great oysters because we couldn't eat anymore.
That's
Great
great.
moment there.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're into the oysters. This is beautiful. I love this. Is there more of this?
There is, yeah. In fact, we haven't even released this to the wine club yet. That goes out in October. So it's a new wine. And yeah, no, it's been fun, man. I've done some barrel tasting, but it's been good.
There's a lot of people doing carbonic stuff now, and some of it I find successful. Some of it's it doesn't work so well for me. Again, you said you didn't do a couple of vintages because you didn't like them. I think people they did it so they're going to bottle it regardless, and I think the integrity of not doing it when it doesn't work is a great thing.
I think, Neil, that's probably the number one thing I was taught is to always make bad wine, because you want to push the edges and be creative and push boundaries and learn, but never show it to anybody. Find somewhere to get rid of it, And so you're right. All we have is that last bottle they had. So if you don't like it, don't send it,
Well, I think that's really cool. So how many wines are you making now under this label? Not how many cases, how many individual SKUs, if you will.
Yeah, it depends on the vintage, but it can be upwards of 12 to 15 separate SKUs, because again, it's not for the faint of heart in terms of wholesale, with wholesale, we only distribute 3 wines in wholesale because they can't deal with it. It's more about direct consumer stuff in the tasting room here. And again, we've had the company for so long. I've got wine club members we've had now for 15, maybe 20 years now. And so, and it's really showing in the vineyard. So yeah, with like just Syrah alone, Syrah and Pinot Noir, our main red grapes, we do white label, low alcohol, high acidity. We do the estate, which is right down the middle. That's one we distribute. Black label, the ripe, heavy extraction, lots of new oak, whole cluster, now carbonic. So that's just in Pinot Noir alone.
Wow.
So, yeah, no, there's a bunch of little wines that we do.
So you keep mentioning it, but you should tell, because if there may be some people in the world that don't know where your tasting room is. You should kind of throw that out there while we're here.
Yeah, I'm actually sitting here in Avila Beach. We've got, if you're local or have visited Avila Beach, there's one stoplight in Avila Beach. You come to that stoplight, make a left turn, and we're the first building on the left. And it's at the end of the Bob Jones Bike Trail, which is a great resource down here. And so, yeah, we're open 7 days a week, noon to 6. And that patio it's rolling within 4 months it's been open, and it really has changed things quite a bit.
That, particularly in these COVID times.
Yeah, that was a strategic logic for me, was like, if not knowing what could happen next, we've gotten, and so when you had a restaurant license, you were able to stay open much longer. And so that was some of the logic there. But for us, it's also focused. We only have one product. It's oysters, and you got to deal with them. So,
when do you find the oysters? Are they always there? I can come in on a Monday afternoon and.
Yeah, they'll be here. What we kind of train our people to, if you really want to make sure they're here, you should buy them ahead of time. We have them on the website, Sinor-LaVallee.com.
So we can book ahead and order some.
That's the key and now we're starting to get that traction, because we've found some people that really love what we're doing. And so, on Wednesday, Tuesday, they're planning their weekend. And so there's email, they're buying the oysters, and again, it's not our main focus. So it's $25 a dozen. Hell, if you're in a wine club, you get it for $20 a dozen. And they order them, and then they come in, and they're reserved for you. So yeah, if you come in, they're fresh on Friday, and they last about 5 days, is what Neil's telling us.
Friday.
So, yeah, so Friday afternoon. Friday afternoon, and deliveries can be sometimes kind of late, 5 o'clock sometimes. So Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday.
Noon on a Saturday is the moment.
That's definitely been good for us, for sure.
So tell me, how many oysters do you eat a week?
Personally, I'm good for at least a dozen a week. I didn't have any before I got in here today, but I know I'm going to take a few as we get
pretty
done.
Hard to go in that building and not crack a couple, surely.
Oh, I tell you what, man, it is nice, and it is fun. It's been a unique experience, and again, sharing. I love in teaching, and people get so intimidated by it. Once they see you do it, it's so easy. It's not dangerous.
An oyster? Yeah,
it's fun. Yeah, shucking it's just something built up in people's minds that and even an oyster itself, I have converted. I can think of 5 to 6 close friends of mine that maybe not to mention the wine business. Our kids play sports together growing up, and they're not really kind of food wine people like we are. And they just couldn't believe it. A raw oyster wouldn't even imagine having one. And once they get a few glasses in them, me at nighttime with them, and I pop some, and they just, you see their eyes just absolutely say, "Oh my gosh, what an experience!" When you have a great oyster, it is a special experience.
It is. I find the Kumamoto to be a good conversion oyster for people because it's nice and small and it's not too aggressive. It's really, that's what took my wife over the edge. She was always going, yeah, I don't really. We had a bunch of those one day, and now she's all over them. Oysters, she loves them.
Yeah,
which is great. It's a great thing to do. I love that idea. I'm going to probably steal that from you at some point in my tasting room life.
Get it?
So we're moving on to Mourvedre. As I told you earlier, I tend to get carried away and forget to taste the wines, but we're going to do it. 2019 Tablas Creek Mourvedre. I haven't had this since it went to bottle, so hopefully it's fantastic.
Isn't that funny, Neil? I'm the same way, and it's just funny. We deal with so much wines, but at the end of the day, wines we create, I just don't have them that often, and when they're bottled, they're out. I mean,
you're on to thinking about something. How am I going to do it better next year?
we have, when you bottle a wine, odds are you got a crop in the field and you got wine in barrel that needs your attention. So it's not, did I go out there and drag the bag and start seeing people? Then I have to go, okay, let's see, 19, what was the weather? What did I do,
I hear particularly Jason talk about the wines, and he has all this information about the wine, and I get down on myself that I don't remember. I remember that, he does that all the time. He writes blogs and he writes about it. He talks about it. Once it's in a bottle, I'm kind of, okay, let's move on. We got, like you said, we got grapes in the vineyard. We got wines in barrel. But it is an incredible thing to forget about them and then come back to them a couple of years later and kind of, okay, there it is. And it's tasting great, by the way.
Oh my gosh. I was just going to say, Neil, the freshness here, the purity of fruit. Mourvedre, I love that anémile, right? Isn't that the in French talk about anémile? And I get a hint of it, but my gosh, this is one of the cleanest forward. I love this. I love this wine.
There's a lot of good earthy notes in it, but it's super, it's kind of primary right now still to me.
Yeah. Yeah. This another wine. Yeah, this definitely needs some age on it, huh? You can tell it's there. It's got the components, but they're really not together yet. Oh, this is beautiful. And you're still doing the big barrels?
With the Foudres?
Yeah, the Foudres, that's right. And how many gallons are those?
1,200.
1,200, yeah.
And we got, I don't know how many we have, probably 30 at this point.
Wow.
I remember the first one arrived, and I was still at Adelaide Cellars, and that thing arrived when we were making the wines for Tablas there, and it was just kind of I'd never seen anything like it. I was a young guy and thought it was the greatest thing I'd ever seen. I still think they're pretty great, but if you happen to go to the tasting room, I think it's you can see it from the tasting room. It's Foudre 3. It's 1995.
Oh, it's still that's great. That's great.
Yeah, you don't want to get rid of them. And our thing is new oak, obviously, so they're the best, and it's very traditional for Chateauneuf also. You're seeing more and more of them make an appearance. A lot of people get them and don't love them. For what we do, they're perfect. We're doing a lot of whites in them these days too.
And this is 100% Mourvedre, it looks like?
Yeah, 100% Mourvedre, from all over the property, all the different blocks that we have. There'll be some head train stuff in there for sure. And of course, as anyone that's watching this knows, it's all organic and biodynamic, and now ROC and native yeast, native mallows. I mean, the focus for Tablas has, and as long as I'm around, always will be, that we're making wines that are a sense of that place that those two families chose to buy. And the more things I can do, which I can do a lot of things to stay out of the way. You know what I mean?
That's the key. I mean, we hear it a lot, but it's so important and it takes experience to get out of the way. We're thinking of my 21-year-old. Oh, let's do this, let's do that, let's add this, and you're like, no. I can hear Ken Brown, because I was that guy. I was I guess 24 years old when I started working for him, and he's like, no, Mike, that's a good idea. Let's do a bench trial. But in the end, he just let it be, and that takes a lot of experience to let it be.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to keep pushing boundaries and trying, but slowly and methodically. You got to remember, particularly with a brand like Tablas, where we've set our flag in the ground of what we are and who we are. You can't make drastic changes. I hate the term. Hear people use the term, "Oh, it's hands-off winemaking." It's not that at all. Our hands are. You can't make meticulous wines hands off. You can let them be themselves, but you got to watch it and you got to be on top of it. It's a term people use that haven't done it, in my opinion.
Without a doubt, it's when you're making a sterile industrial wine, that is so easy. My first job, I worked at Corbin Canyon Winery, which I have a lot of respect for. John Clark is still around, consulting for Rava.
A lot of people went through that facility.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's one of the best winemakers in the world because he's able to take some pretty rough stuff, make great wine, which is probably the hardest. Is the hardest thing to do. But it's so much easier to hook up the filters, to pasteurize. I mean, everything is just easy to but a wine of this character and length and complexity takes a lot of hard work to do nothing, is really what it's about, and the industrial wines are just easy, so much easier.
It's a complicated thing. Yeah, there's no escape route on these things.
So, in Mourvedre, one of the things I love about Tablas, you guys do that board. I've seen people, I haven't installed it yet. I need to. But each lot that comes in, you guys just categorize it. You've been doing this, I think, for a long time.
It's been a few years. And, the origin of that board is I had that board created so that I'd have to walk past it every day and not forget things, because I was starting to forget lots, and that was the origin of that board. Is I wanted stuff on. I never envisioned it being all super clean like it is. I just envisioned it being, Mourvedre lot. So when I walk by to go to the lab, I see, shit, I forgot about the Syrah in tank 3. I should go check on that. And now it's turned into a tourist attraction.
I tell you what, I've seen other people copy it. I love it. My question, though, is about the Mourvedre we have in that bottle today. How many lots post-vintage, I'm saying, in December, how many lots of Mourvedre are you usually playing with out of the field?
Oh, gosh. I don't know the answer to that. I mean, probably 8 to 12, I suppose. Maybe that's underestimating. Depends on the year, too, because we pick so many small lots, depending on ripeness and top of hill, bottom of hill. But it's thorough. That board, funny thing, I've been talking to my son over the last couple of weeks, and he was working with us. And I keep saying, I don't know when we brought in such and such last year. And he keeps going on his phone and looking and saying, oh, we brought it on September 15th, 6 tons. And I was just not really thinking about it. And then he did it in the lab today in Chelsea that works with him. And he looks at him and goes, what are you looking at on your phone? And he had a picture of that board on his phone.
Genius.
Yeah, I could have done that. All right. This big fella.
Yeah.
You need a younger man to lift it.
Yes. This is our Pearl Collection Cabernet Sauvignon from Ancient Peaks. Something we're super proud of. Ancient Peaks.
Let's talk about Ancient Peaks a little bit, because you haven't done that yet.
Yeah, thank you. Man, what a blessing. Doug Filipponi called me at Chamisol Winery, vintage of 2005. At the end of my vintage 05, cool climate, things were wrapped up. I was pressed off, and he called, and the 3 families had just acquired the lease from Robert Mondavi. And so they were looking for wineries to crush their fruit for them. And, hey, we had open tanks, and so they brought us 100 tons of Cabernet, and we made it into wine for them. And that started the conversation, and we got together and started what's called Ancient Peaks today. So really, you know, I'm the founding winemaker. Stuart Cameron is the hands-on winemaker today, and so we started the company together. They were not in the wine business before, and so I got with them. And we crushed some fruit in '06 together, and starting in January 1st of '07, we kind of rolled up the sleeves and created what's called Ancient Peaks today. So anyway, and we created it, something I'm very proud of, in '06, to deliver value. And if you can remember back, '06 is really because sideways dropped in late '04. And so they were on that sideways effect. Everybody's loving Pinot, right? and so we were, and everybody was raising their prices, starting wineries. I mean, every winery in that era was started at $42 a bottle of Syrah to Paso Robles, with zero track record. And so we said, no, let's go to market with an everyday wine. These guys, at the time, we had about 2,000 acres of estate fruit that they owned. And
2,000 acres.
2,000 acres. 1,000 acres on the east side. They had the F&T and the San Juan vineyard, and they had the Margarita vineyard, approximately 1,000 acres under vines. So we knew it'd be a serious company that could deliver wines at a pretty good volume. And so we were very prideful. Say, let's make wine for the weekday, And so that's what we started with. That's what we're known for today as Ancient Peaks. But one of my favorite quotes from Timothy Leary is, "You've got to go out of your mind and come to your senses," right? And so that's what that wine's about, is pushing is just best practices, in the vineyards, really getting after the viticulture, getting after the winemaking, doing all this stuff that anybody who's making $50, $60, $100 bottles of wine, doing that same work and seeing what we can do. And so we waited 3 or 4 years before we took it to market. We made these wines. From the very beginning to '06, we had a wine called Oyster Rage, which is our kind of tete de cuvee, our best of the best. But that's a Cabernet-based blend. And so there was a lot of input from ownership saying, "Hey, guys, let's work on a cab-only wine." And so we really started that some years ago. Made the attempts. We liked it, but man, it had to be right. And 17 in the glass. 17 was our first vintage of this, when we really felt we had it together enough to come out pretty strong.
It's powerful. It's a great wine. It's good. It's supple though, right? It's not, the tannins are really resolved.
Yeah,
it's not overly woody to me. I don't think. I like it. I like the texture of it a lot. I don't drink a lot of cab these days, but maybe I should.
Label.
The label's cool too. Very descriptive.
Yeah, I was definitely back when we came up with those labels. That goes back to an old philosophy I was taught many years ago. Now, and that's something I hold to this day: is we're here to promote wine first, then region, then your label. And so when you look at that bottle, the first thing you see is the wine. You read the wine, then you read Paso, and then almost in the background is us, the company. Now, again, because we're looking at a $65, $70 bottle of wine. Our entry level stuff, the stuff we're in 46 states around the country, it's the opposite. We've got Ancient Peaks big. We need to have shelf presence to get it off the shelf. But for this sort of wine, this quality of wine, we always want the wine to lead first. And that's really what you see there.
Yeah, but I think that's important. I hope that it's something that continues with the newer wave of winery owners and winemakers that come in, that for us, first and foremost, obviously we want to promote Paso, and we have all the sub-appellation stuff going on now, and that comes second. It's like we got to lift Paso up, and then everybody wins. And you can do your own job of promoting your sub-appellations, etc. But it's really important for me anyway, when I go out, just trying to get this region known, because it wasn't so long ago when no one knew where Paso was. There weren't people coming here and buying big pieces of land. The really wealthy guys that are coming into town now, which is great. Welcome, come on in. But they weren't looking here 20 years ago, because the reputation wasn't there. Now it is, and with the influx of this stuff, hopefully it just gets better. That's what I hope for.
I think I agree with you. I think, and it's on the path, but there's also Napa and Sonoma has really laid the groundwork. And so I think it's never going to be that concentrated as far as a location. And I really see Paso be more akin to the Rhone Valley, where it's longer. You know, you got to get in the car and go see wineries. You're just not going to hop to each one. And so there's a geography here that it leads to a little more open. And ag, you know, you got to look at our county. I mean, it was back in, I guess it's now a while ago, 2010, 11. Strawberries beat us for revenue for our county.
No.
You know, we're not a monoculture. Yeah, we got a lot of grapes. And just so happens, those grapes are planted around the highways. So if you get in a small plain, there's a lot of land, open land here.
Not seen fully.
You just don't see it from the highway. And so, oh my God, there's grapes everywhere. It's like, well, you know, yeah, they're everywhere around the highway. And so it's still an agrarian experience here with lots of other crops. So I think that's something that we'll always have.
Something I wanted to mention earlier, just as a side note, maybe this isn't for on the air, but whatever. You mentioned that you bought grapes from Lunamata at some point. I picked up Sanso from Lunamata 3 days ago, and it's the last harvest out of that vineyard. The vineyard was bought by Dow Winery, and they're going to replace that vineyard with whatever cab, I would assume. But it's kind of a sentimental moment because that vineyard was kind of a benchmark for quite a few years. Steffi Turizzi doing a great job of organic farming and all that business. So it's kind of a sad moment having her load up the grapes and go, well, this is the last time this is going to happen.
Yeah, I've heard the story, and they had,
you know, it is what it is. I'm not.
One thing, constant life has changed, and so it definitely. But when I think of Brian Teresi, and I first met them, in fact, Brian Teresi started his winery at my winery.
Oh, he did? I didn't know that.
Yeah. So Giornata.
There's got to be some Broadside connection there, right? I would imagine.
What's that?
The brand Broadside has something to do with.
Oh yeah. We started Broadside. Like again, it all happened at the same time. We started Ancient Peaks almost the same year they started Broadside, and then Broadside was started at Ancient Peaks. So at my little Sinor-LaVallee company, we had Giornata and Sinor-LaVallee, and the big stuff up there, we helped them get started with Broadside. But Brian was a student at Fresno State. And I was asked to be on a panel about biodynamic organic stuff. And so I was there and just doing what we do, sharing information, meeting people. And then he was a wine buyer at Sam's. Have you ever been to Sam's Deli in Fresno, Neil? But
yeah, I'm not.
Oh man, it's a great account. Great wines, but better food, great people. And so anyway, I walk in there, he's like, "Hey, you're Mike Sinor." I'm like, "Oh, wow, okay." You know, get that, you know. And anyway, we supported the relationship, and he was still in school. He ended up coming over here and started the company, and it was just exciting. And I just have absolutely loved what him and Steffi and their twins have done with the Edo pasta. I mean, you talk about this guy, Brian's got it down, you know.
And the Gironata wines, I haven't been there for too long. I keep saying I'm going to go. Maybe I'll go this weekend, but I've always enjoyed their wines with restraint, very much kind of an old world feel to them, different than a lot of the other stuff happening in that little area down there.
Without a doubt. And back to that Italian stuff in Lunamata, you know, that's really what brought them to Lunamata was the guy, John, who owned it and planted it, got access to some new clonal material that was not here before. And they saw that as young college kids really and forged a relationship with him. And they personally brought in, I mean, they made that vineyard. It was Brian and Steffi with her technique, their contacts. You got Pax Mall. I mean, they were selling to all the great brands, you know. And so, yeah, no, it's an interesting evolution of life.
Yeah, we stuck in there. We've only been in there a couple of years. My kids have been making a carbonic Sanso out of that vineyard the last couple of years, and super fun, great wines. I'm sorry to see it go, but you know, we move on. The guy John, I think they'd had enough of farming, and off they go, and it's perfect location for Dadis to be. So there it goes.
Yeah, no. Regardless, that's going to be a great location for whatever's there because that it's a wonderful spot.
Now, one of my greatest vineyards is right across the street, the Bailey's Infidel Vineyard. So we'll be watching that come along. How Paso is changing? Well, it's 6:04, man. It's been an hour. It's Friday night. You've probably got some oysters to eat. I would imagine because the shipment just arrived.
We do have some fresh ones now, man. Come on down.
I bet you do. If you were a little closer, I would be right there. Well, it's great speaking to you, Mike, and thank you so much for this. We're looking forward to coming down and bringing the kids down and coming and seeing the Grenache and doing that thing this year. Hopefully, we'll do it justice.
Well, I'm sure you will. It's an honor to sell you guys some fruit, but thank you again for having me here at the Tablas Creek and everything you guys have done for me, for the local business. This is fun to do this, man. So thank you for having me, and really appreciate it.
Cheers. Let's go eat some oyster.
Cheers, my friend.
Cheers.